is when you start preparing for your self-appraisal at the end of the year.
And
it's
by
not,
the way,
it's not something to do at the end of the year.
This 1 hour masterclass is on YouTube
for
free
if
you search.
So I would encourage people to watch it because everyone, like September, October time, they start kind of preparing. I'm like, you start from January, you start making notes of all the things you're going to talk about, your achievements and things, because trust me, you get to November and you will feel like you've done nothing all year because life has lifed, right?
Yeah.
But if you've been keeping track, you've been having conversations, been seeking feedback, going out, by the time you're doing it, and if you've been having the conversations with your manager is aware. This is a really good skill. Your manager needs to be aware of how you think your performance is. So if I'm talking to my manager, I'm like, I've had a really tough year, but I've smashed this and I've smashed that. So they should know that if they're going to come and rate me a 3, B is going to be pissed because she thinks she's a 4 or a 5 because she has been sounding and sharing her view on herself. But we don't do, a lot of people don't do that. They just say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. And then they get the 3 and it's like, no, I think I'm a 5. At what point did you share that?
Exactly.
So it's a conversation all throughout the year. You teach people how to treat you. And that's why I think confidence is a huge make or break, because if you are confident, then you teach people to treat you in a certain 100%. Way. If you are not confident, then people treat you how they like and you take it.
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to ask is, how do you ensure that same that the same way HR, if we'll put it that way, feels about diversity and inclusion, the same way you feel about diversity and inclusion, that cuts across levels? So it's not just sat with you or the HR team, but everyone else understands diversity and inclusion. They embrace it. How can we actually ensure that?
And I think it goes back to the point that B made earlier around it's people who make up an organization, right? So if you want to influence people, and I think that's the hardest bit, especially for me. I feel like I'm an evangelist in the sense that I just want to go around spreading good news everywhere, and for everyone to just, you give people the Kool-Aid, they drink it, and then everybody is inclusive and we sing together. And that doesn't always happen. And in the organization I work in, there's 130,000 employees, over 2,000 locations. I can't go everywhere and say, hey,
of course,
you need to be inclusive. So it's about equipping the leaders, equipping the individuals. And you do that through policy. You do that through process. And when I think everything that B has shared around performance is so critical, because actually most organizations have some of this stuff in place.
Yeah.
There are so many people I know and I've worked with, they've never read the maternity policy. They've never read the grievance policy. They've never challenged the maternity or grievance policy. If your company says you get 3 months paid maternity, no one has said, okay, hi, Jaguar Land Rover gives 1 year full pay. How competitive can we be with that? And I don't work I just heard that they do that. So shout out Jaguar Land Rover. But, we should be challenging, because we are the stewards of the culture. We should be going and saying, actually, I think we could do this better. What do you think, HR? Because to your point, everyone thinks HR knows better.
Yeah.
But the reality is we're also just working hard to do our jobs. And sometimes it takes people bringing that innovation to help change some of those things that hold up the system. So the policies is one, the processes is one. If you have a grievance about what someone has said, a lot of people think grievance, you have to get up and you have to go and call. The meaning of grievance is just, I have a problem.
Yes.
In a professional context.
Yeah.
Your company has a policy on how to deal with when you have a problem. Why have you never read that policy? And you are stressing, you don't know what to do about it. They have a performance policy. You've not sat and read how your company thinks people should run a performance process. So you don't know how to do it. And therefore, your manager just gives you a bad rating every time. So I think there's a big piece around HR influences things. Leaders influences things through policy, through communications, through campaigns. You have the opportunity then to influence that in a positive way. But also, if you don't know what those things are, how do you uphold it? Now, we talked about being friends at work, and what I love is that we've created a safe space for each other, and that transcends even us working together. We have a WhatsApp group now. It's called 4Ds, and that was 4 of us who came together. We all worked in HR as Black women, and we've been for dinner at times, and one person is writing emails about salary negotiation, and we've been like, sis, add an extra 0 to the end of that amount you're about to send. Or I'm about to write a letter to my company. We'll read over that for you and give you feedback. I'm about to have a difficult conversation with my boss. We'll practice it together. We actually physically do this with each other.
That's great.
You know, we'll say, have you read your policy on this? Ask for the policy. And I think that's the thing we all have to do. You will have peers who are working and they'll come to you and tell you, I'm having a difficult time with my boss. But, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me buy you a coffee. Well, coffee is lovely for 30 minutes.
Oh my word,
but what happens after that? So if you are armed with the policy, if you're armed with the information, you are the steward of that culture, and you can say to the person, actually, this is what the process says. Why don't you pick up? And actually, if you need someone to come with you, I'll come and be your witness. And that's what we should be doing. We should be looking at the systems, what the provisions in those systems are. We should be challenging the provisions in those systems, and we should be upholding the ones we think are good.
Yes. I really agree with you on this, because you know, helping each other in this those scenarios are really very helpful. A mentee of mine got sponsored by a company on tier 2, and in the contract they said she was going to pay back a stipulated amount of money depending on how many years she's able to spend on that sponsorship. And then she only spent, after they sponsored her, she got another job 3 months after, and then needed to leave, which means she has to pay 80%. So she ran to me. I was like, I'm really scared. What am I supposed to do? I said, first, let's look at the wording of that contract that you signed. And then 2, what does the Home Office say?
Is that even legal, actually?
Yeah, it is. You can sign a contract, but the Home Office has listed on their website what the employer, the money they can take back from you and what they cannot take back from you. So things like legal fees and stuff like that, they cannot reimburse it from yourself. And then since they were going to be refunded the health surcharge, so that reduced the money a lot. So at the end of the day, rather than paying £8,000 back, she only paid back £2,500 on the payment plan. And essentially, they did not even know either. The people that signed the contract did not know. We had to do that research by going to the Home Office website, even calling the Home Office and saying, what can she pay back? And they were able to say, no, they cannot ask that back. We're going to refund this amount of money. They had to draft an email. She sent it to me. I read it. I said, yeah, that's fine. Then send it back to the person. So I really agree with that.
And that's so important. And I think we don't do that enough. And also another thing is, they could have actually gone to the company that's employing them and saying, whoops, guess what? I've got this £2,500 bill, but you clearly want me, because they've now offered her the job.
She did, but they said no.
Okay. But they said
she
no.
did. Yes, she did.
What, you know, sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. And you can ask. And a lot of people don't realize they can ask a lot of things. I know people who've left a company, who've been offered a job, decided not to leave the company because they're worried they have to pay back their bonus. And it's like, well, but the company can buy out your bonus. So there's so much that's been left on the table because we just don't know policies exist.
We don't talk to each other.
We don't talk to each other.
And I don't know if that's a black thing.
I think it might
we don't
be.
share certain. My husband's very much like this. It's like, oh no, we don't, because when we were moving, we've got like a WhatsApp group of everyone on the street, and I was like, oh, can I just find out if anyone knows someone at the council if we want to do planning? No, we can't let people know we're moving.
No, there's a winch in the village. Where's it from?
Your village when you're traveling and you don't want anyone to know.
If you're going for an interview, you can't tell people.
You don't tell people.
But you see, I think things like that, not that there aren't village people.
That's another story. That's another story.
I think she's scared now, so that the village people are not seeing us.
Before they come and say, I want to show you that we exist. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that when we keep information from each other, this is how it hurts. Right? And I think, you know, I used to tell Winnie when we worked together, because Winnie is a social butterfly. She's talking to everyone. And I used to say to her, look, the fact that you and I are friends is an added bonus. I come to the office to work and get paid, and I'm going home. So I don't notice when people don't talk to me, because I'm like, I came here to work. And Winnie showed me that actually having friendships and relationships at work aren't just added bonuses. They're integral to having a thriving career. And I think what she has mentioned about all of us being there for each other is what helps. And I think the more we keep information to ourselves, the more someone is having a hard time for longer, because we've kept information to ourselves. So the power of your peer network is super duper important.
So
Investing in that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you did say something about, is it a black thing? And, you know, in this planning for this podcast, some of the things that we've also experienced is it's almost like some people don't want others to get to the level where they are.
Scarcity mentality.
Do you know what? Can I challenge that though? Because I know that happens. I'm not negating that.
Yes.
But the more senior I get, the more I realize some people don't know how they got to where they are. And I know that sounds really bad.
Okay.
But sometimes people can't tell the story of how they got to, because sometimes it was hard and they don't see the good as they're going through, or they don't know what one thing because they had to do 10 million.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can't articulate that fear or discomfort, so they choose not to engage. And sometimes it's subconscious.
Yeah.
Because if you ask them, actually, they can't always tell you about the time where a manager bullied them and it was so bad that it affected their mental health, but they didn't have anyone to talk to, so they couldn't.
Yeah.
Or the times that no one would be their friend at work and that was hard. Or actually the fact that a job came up and they didn't think, actually, after the 30th job interview you went to, you finally got one.
Yeah.
They sometimes think it's luck.
Yes.
So how do you communicate luck? So we actually have to do a better job sometimes of telling our people,
Yes.
do you know what, actually you did do a fantastic job and you should document it.
And it's not a fluke.
It's not a fluke. And we've got to remember that draining hasn't stopped.
No.
Because we were talking about this. It's been a really difficult week. You've been recovering with the flu. B was so poorly this week, right?
Oh,
and
thank you for coming still.
Sorry, babe.
Yeah, and you know, you still had to work. You know, I had to take my kids swimming. There's been some nights this week I haven't slept before midnight or 1 because there's a presentation that needs to be done. The reality is, for Black people, we are working twice as hard. There's a great book on that by Raphael Sofoluke. It's Sofoluke. I think that's what it is. You know, we'll respect how they and pay me. And it's a brilliant book about how the experience. But the reality is, the senior leaders that have made it, they are still working hard to stay there and to get. So it's hard. Sometimes it's just hard.
Yeah, they get one of our guests call it a burden.
It's a burden.
You know, I think the burden where I have moments where, and it's so weird to explain. If anyone is an X-Men fan, there is a mutant who can morph into anyone.
Yes.
And basically she always looks human. And someone said to her, you're using part of your power to always look human.
Yes.
And I think that's how I always feel drained, in the sense that I need to be excellent, but there's this extra burden of having to stay excellent because I can't let the Black side down because I have to do this for the people. Someone's looking up at me. I also have to leave the door open for for it's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
And I'm like, fam, I just want to be. Like, when do I get a day off where I can look homeless and but you cannot, because at any point in time, you are like this shining example, and it is a lot.
You're thinking twice as hard. You're coming into
all
meetings.
The time.
You're thinking just to make sure, I'm not gonna goof this. I'm not gonna. You know, you
it's
just
a lot
want
of pressure.
to be excellent. The other group might not need to. I've made a mistake. They take you on, and sometimes we beat ourselves over the mistake.
100%. And this is why, if there are Black people who don't want to share their story, they don't want to come and talk about it. Sometimes I'm like, do you know what? You've earned your opportunity to rest.
It's the
just rest. It's like, okay.
I don't care about the next generation. They'll be fine.
You guys will be fine.
There's
enough out there for them. You guys fight the good fight. You're all right.
And it's hard to look at that. Especially when you are the ones creating the podcast, you're talking, you're mentoring. Half the time you just come out of a difficult conversation with your boss, and then you have to encourage someone, tell you got it, girl.
You got it,
It's not easy. And there's
a
a really great model called The Saboteurs by an organization called Positive Intelligent. They talk about 10 saboteurs that many of us are navigating in our careers and daily lives. And one of those is the saboteur of the judge. And I think we have been conditioned, if someone chooses to do something differently, to be like, oh, well, why? Why are they doing this? And that's one of the things I'm working really hard to let go of, because actually I can't achieve something that I judge. So if someone has said, actually, I've got to the pinnacle of my career as a Black person, and actually I just want to rest now.
That's okay.
I'm actually starting to be like, okay, enjoy your rest.
So how do you ensure a fair and unbiased recruitment?
Yeah. I'm sure Winnie can add a lot to this in terms of her role. But I think for me, the criteria for the role is where you start from. I've done early careers, and I think there's something about, when you say, I want someone to have 5 years of X or to have gone to this particular university, all of a sudden you're excluding, whether it's someone from a socioeconomic background or whatever. And I think it's asking challenging questions about, well, do they really need a degree in X, or do they really need X years of experience? I think so. From just the criteria, it's the challenging and thinking more about the outcomes of the role rather than the requirement. I think it's important who is involved in the recruitment process. So the fact that you're in the room to question, that's why you're there.
Yeah.
Because if I go for a role and I have 4 interviewers and they're all white men, I already have a judgment on the organization, because you should have diversity in colleagues that you're telling me to come and work with. So I think making sure that you're putting your best foot forward as the organization and making sure there is a, variety of people involved in the process that can give a variety of feedback as well. So I think you're doing your job. That's why you're there, so that you can highlight, because unconscious bias, I think people have made it seem like it's a negative thing. And yes, it is. But sometimes we all do it naturally.
Yes, we all got biases,
right?
in us, yes.
You're doing it because you've been able to connect with those people who are ethnically diverse, because you can connect on a level that maybe a white person wouldn't.
Yes.
That's why it's important that you're involved in the process as well, right? So it's making sure that the recruitment process is created to be as fair as possible, to involve as many people as possible. So there is a variety of backgrounds and a variety of feedback or outcomes that can come on the back of it. The unconscious bias thing, it's training that people do. And I get really upset when people talk about fit. I think they'll just fit in with the team. But you need to ask yourself, do you want a team of clones of you? Or do you want a team where there's a diversity of thought, where there's a diversity of challenge? What I will say, though, is I have noticed that sometimes when ethnically diverse people interview, when it comes to getting the point across in an articulate manner, they might struggle with that sometimes. And that's where equity comes in place. That's where the interviewer can, make them feel comfortable, ask probing questions, blah, blah, blah. But I do have to say, if you want to come correct, right? So make sure that, from an interview perspective, you're ready, you can get your points across, you've got your questions. You can ask for feedback in the interview. People don't do that, but you can. Just tell me how I've come across. Tell me if I've answered, like when you answer a question, does that answer the question for you, or is there anything you want me to elaborate? So they're quick things that people can do to interview better. But I think organizations owe it to make sure they have a diverse panel and to ensure that that's what's helping more diverse people come through the pipeline. But data will show, Winnie can spew data at you in terms of how many people apply, how many people get through to interview. So there's things that will take off people's names off of their CV, because once people see a Mohammed, oh my God, so it strips all of that. So all you can see is the background and the experience and things. So we can strip through all of that to make it as inclusive as possible. But I think your role is important in making sure that we're challenging and speaking up as well.
Yeah, fantastic. How do you ensure that organizations maintain the same kind of like onboarding for all of their employees, regardless if they are BAME or not, specifically if they have had complaints in the past that diverse people have not actually received the kind of onboarding that other people have received? What can they do better to ensure that everyone can receive the same kind of onboarding?
I think it all comes down to consistency in process. I talked about systemic issues. Systemic issues are driven when there are processes that are not in favor of certain groups. But I often find that there is more room for systemic bias if no process exists at all. So, for example, if there is a process for how all performance reviews should go, if everyone follows that process, at least you know everybody has been treated in the same way.
Yes.
Now, sometimes being treated in the same way isn't always a good thing, because sometimes we all need difference, but at least it's a starting point that you can build that difference onto. So whether that's, this person needs adjustments, or we might need to do this slightly differently for this person, but you can't do that if you don't have a benchmark even to start with. So I think consistent process is very important. And that's why I came also on the point around challenging the systems you see. And when we do podcasts like this, because obviously in our day jobs, we're fixing things in the company. So when we come onto a podcast or we're talking to people or doing talks, we like to talk about what the person can do.
Yes.
So the first thing I like to say to people is, when you're being interviewed in a process, a company will tell you, we want to do 5 interviews, we want to do 3, we want to do 6. And you're like, bet. You turn up to all 5 or 6, and then you're done. There's been times I've asked for extra interviews. So I've said, I would like to meet this person in your organization, and I would like to meet this other person in your organization. And I bring the competency questions. So tell me about a time when you dealt with a difficult situation and how did you manage it? Tell me about a time when you've dealt with an underperforming person and how did you deal with that? Tell me about a time when you've nurtured someone in your team. What was the outcome in that? What are you passionate about? Some of us forget that we are interviewing our companies and we are interviewing our bosses.
Yes.
So, people turn up to interviews and they don't have any questions they want to ask the company. What is your onboarding process like? Is an important question you should be asking. And back to the point that B made around, you need to teach people how to treat you. There is nothing wrong with sending an organization an email a month before you join to say, I'm really excited. There's a month left of my notice period. Can't wait to join the organization. Can I just clarify, having read the contract, what do you have in place for this? Is there parking on site? Sometimes it might be the most simple questions around logistics, but in other ways, have you got some time set up with my key stakeholders for me? Have you got an onboarding plan? If you don't, here are the 3 people I'd like to meet because I think it will just help set me up for success. You can ask those questions. And sometimes people think they sound difficult. I think there should be a capability built around professional difficulty. Because if you are not professionally difficult, your life will be difficult in that professional environment.
You suffer.
You will suffer. So it is okay to pass that discomfort on. They should be, if you think about it like a relationship, when you first meet someone, the first year is the most magical honeymoon period.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same with the job. Your honeymoon period is the time where you should ask for all the things that would set you up for success, because that's when they are the most excited to welcome you. Not that you're now a year in, there's a year of resentment because they've not set you up well. You've not got what you needed. And now we're all angry. So now you're demanding what you need. And it's going to come out worse because now you're angry. So I think we have to all build the competency around asking for what you need. And if you don't know what you need, ask your friends what has worked for them. Do you know, there was one opportunity I had that I'm a secret introvert, so I'm very chatty and everyone thinks I just love to chat, but I secretly love sitting in a dark room by myself watching Desperate Housewives. That's what makes me happy. And when I'm under pressure, I want to do things quickly and get it done. And there was one job that came up at a time when there were so many other things going on, and I just wanted it to be done. They had the offer. Sounded good. The pay was in line with what I wanted. There was one other company, so it was like I was counter offering at that time. But I knew I didn't want to be in that industry. So I just thought, I know what I want. So I'm just going to sign the dotted line. I'm just going to do it and then let's get it done because I've got other things going on. I can't tell you how much money I left on that table. Do you know how many things I didn't negotiate, I didn't think about? And now I always kick myself because I didn't have the instinct to pick up the phone and say, sis, I've just read the contract. It all looks good. But what else do you think I should be thinking about? What else do you think I should be asking? And my sis would have told me, this lady...
I don't leave money on the table.
She does not leave money on the table. She knows all the right questions. She knows what. So if
So
you
we know
don't
what to call
know,
now. Yeah.
you know, trust me. This is why I was on to her about the course, because I just want all the information. But this is the thing. I feel if you don't know what to ask someone what they asked. Ask someone what set you up for success.
Yeah.
You know, ask your mentors what are the things that have helped you to know. If your company doesn't offer you a buddy, ask them, can I have a buddy?
Yes.
If your company doesn't offer you a mentor, find your own mentor. In my current organization, I have to do a lot of ESG reporting. I speak to the board quite a lot. And there's one guy on the board I really liked. We're very different people. I liked how over and forthright he was. And I went to him and I said, would you mentor me? He still jokes about it today and be like, oh, God, she asked me to be a mentor. But he loves it. And I love it. And it benefits both of us.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, we have to be better at saying, things don't happen to us. You have to ask for what you need to be able to succeed.
Absolutely.
When it comes to your onboarding.
Absolutely. And I think it comes from confidence. I know I keep banging on about it.
Yeah.
But I think if people work on their confidence, then they know that they should be asking for certain things.
Yeah.
And being able to articulate what you need for success is a skill set if you want to be a leader.
Yeah.
It means you know yourself and you know what you need. And so you should go straight in and ask for it. You ask at interview so that it's not a surprise, but you know, it's a question you go in. People ask, what are you going to do in the first 90 days? And then you should ask them, how are you going to support me in the first 90 days?
Yes.
What do you have as a plan for me to succeed? If you're not going in and asking those questions, you're not ready to lead.
100%. And equally, you know, you talk a lot about confidence, and I think you're right.
It's huge.
But sometimes people, if you don't have confidence, don't look at us and say, because I don't have B and Winnie's confidence, I can't do it. Sometimes it takes courage and intention before you get to that confidence.
Yeah.
We can sit here and say this because we've done it a few
We've
times.
trial and error.
Yeah.
But the first few times we did it, we were terrified. And even today, there'll be things I say, B, I'm really scared to send this email. And she'd be like, oh, sanity is a gift. Your sanity is a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
What I mean by that is everybody always expects us to take the higher ground.
Yes.
You know, people be acting cray-cray to you at work and they expect you to act in a dignified manner. And so I always say to Winnie, and I will, but understand that it's a gift. My sanity and being civil to you is a gift. And if you switch it up, so can I. So sometimes you need to be able to show that, you know what, my lack of response
be another side.
is an act. It's not because I can't do anything.
Yeah.
100%. And it's through that, you know, we'll have the conversation. It won't be received well sometimes, but now you know next time how to say it.
Yeah.
And if you're able to build all those things, those confidence come from the fact that actually, I know I can get another job. Why? Because it wasn't all, my managers were amazing in a lot of cases and they helped me. But if they didn't give me feedback, I asked for my own. If they didn't create a career plan for me, I created my own.
Taking back control.
So you know about your own source.
Yes.
So therefore you think, actually, if you don't treat me great, it's fine. You know,
I'll go where
there was
I'm
a door
celebrated.
that I came through and there's
I'll
a door
use
another.
that door still.
And it doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't have to be difficult. It's just life.
Yeah.
You know, thank you. It's been a great opportunity. Thank you. It's been a great season.
Yeah.
And take care.
So if you, and this is really good because now you haven't been the first person to say that. There have been other people said, you know, if the environment is not right for you, you should leave.
Yes.
How does that affect you though? Because as your HR, a lot of people look at your CV and see that you spent 6 months or 12 months somewhere or 8 months. Yeah, okay. And then they're asking you questions, but then as soon as you tell them it wasn't the right environment for me, strike you out.
That's not true.
Oh, well. Okay.
That's not true.
So please, let's hear from you.
That's not true. I recruit. I look. It is, if you have someone who is constantly hopping, that becomes a question for, that's interesting. A lot of places don't seem to agree with you. But I have been in an organization where they didn't pass my probation. And so I exited within 6 months. And, you know, I could have said, oh, I don't want it to look on my CV that I've been here, so I'm going to stay for a year before I move. But I'm pleased to say in the last maybe 10 years, I've been headhunted for every role that I've gone for. So I haven't really applied for roles.
Yeah.
So I don't go there saying, oh, I applied, because they're asking and telling me why they've picked me.
Yes.
So that has not been an issue.
Yes.
But I think my well-being, I'm at that point where I know what my deal breakers are. I know my well-being is important. So I won't stay in a place because, you know, oh, I need to stay here for a year so it doesn't look funny on my CV. What I would say to people, because obviously if I did that 3 times, 4 times in a row, not great. So what questions are you asking at interview? How are you making sure, or are you just grateful to leave? You know, me and Winnie had this conversation when we were talking to people. You get to a part in your career where you can't just leave for any job. It has to tick the boxes.
Yes.
And so when you're going through the interview, that's why Winnie's saying, I'll ask for extra interviews. They might tell you, oh, it's only 3 interviews. I remember I said, I need to have another interview with this person because here are some deal breakers in my current role, and I want to make sure that's not happening in this role. I'm going to say, oh, can I speak to so-and-so on the team because I need to make sure we get on. Like you... That is the confidence. If you're not confident, there's certain things you cannot ask for because in your mind, you don't think you're worthy of that. But if you want to be really targeted about your next role, you will ask all the questions. It's not to say it guarantees that that role would be perfect.
Yes.
But it will weed out all of the weirdy ones before you get into a position where you're now like, oh, I did 6 months in the last role. Now it's 6 months. I'm already getting frustrated again. You have to weed that through in the interview. And that is when you're asking as many questions as they're asking you. Because now you're thinking, I'm going to gift you my skill.
Yes.
Are you guys worthy? Just like they're asking, you know, are you worthy to join our organization? You should be asking, is this an organization I want to be part of? Because if I join, I'm going to give you my 100%. I'm going to be amazing. So I think it really stems from confidence. The more people clock onto that, the more it's a make or break.
And I think you've got to see yourself as a commodity, and not in a sense that you're a
valuable
thing.
commodity.
You're a valuable commodity.
Yeah.
So what that means is you can tell a company will tell you you need to be in this role for 6 months before you can get to this position. You can tell yourself, I can build that value within myself in 2 years, which makes me marketable 4 years earlier. That's within your gift. So if the company is not ready in 6 years, you can say, actually, but I'm ready to propel myself there in 2. So now I just need the environment that will allow me to do that in 2 years. And that's the bit around when you're interviewing. If you interview the right company, you know you're going in there confidently to say, I could do 3 years here.
Yes.
But I also think if you strategically plan your career, if an environment isn't great, you can weigh up. We weigh up all the time. So there's been times where I've worked in a company where maybe the boss was annoying, but in the grand scheme of I get paid well, I'm able to achieve my strategic career goals, the commute is good, it's okay, I can deal with an annoying boss.
Yeah.
So you can then weigh up, what do I want to get from this experience? Because if you think about yourself as a valuable commodity, if you go somewhere and it's now a rubbish place, you are killing your value, they're not nurturing your gift, and your soul is destroyed.
You don't get paid enough for that.
Exactly. They are killing your value. It's like having gold. You've bought an expensive gold bracelet.
Yes.
And then you just let your child play with it and they're scratching it.
Yeah.
You know, when you sell it now, it's not going to be worth what you...
Yeah.
And you've got to think about yourself that way. So actually, to your point around, if they look at your CV and they say, why did you leave after 6 months? Sometimes it's the strategic response. It might be the environment was not right for me, but it could be actually I was ready to propel myself into this career, into this role. And when I looked at my career goals and the organization, they didn't have that role available. And I think it was just a really great time to part ways. And I'm excited about the future.
Oh, fantastic.
It can still be a horrible thing to talk about, but you can talk about you are in charge of your own story.
Yeah.
You can tell your story in a way that's empowering. Yeah. It doesn't have to happen to you.
You know, I'm thinking someone is sitting out there thinking, okay, hang on. B's been there. She's done 20 years. You know, but then how about I'm just coming in, you know, I need the job. I need to start off. Or maybe I'm not just coming in. Maybe I'm mid-level somewhere, you know. Can I really just be outright, okay, I'm jumping. I may not have been headhunted just yet.
Yeah.
But can I outright, you know, just put it out? Oh, okay, you know what? This is what I want, or this is what... There's the fear of I might be the one putting them off now for some people, because it's great to grow to a point where you know what, I can be out of here and in less than, even whilst I'm here, someone is headhunting me. But then there's another person that's thinking, okay, I haven't got all of this just yet. I'm still trying to navigate.
That's the weighing, though.
Okay.
That's the weighing that Winnie was talking about. So I haven't always been, oh, they didn't pass my probation, so I need them, right? There's the time in your career where you're grafting, where I talk about when you're like 0 to 5 years, that is when excellence is important. That is when you build your technical skill.
Yes.
Then you're executing, right? So you want to be good. Once you hit that 5-year mark, when you're starting to progress, you're starting to maybe manage a direct report here, get a team here and there. It's now moving from technical capability more to your personal skills, right? So there's a time in your career when you focus on being really good. Yeah. And then there's a time in your career where you then focus on your brand and sponsors and how people think about you and things like that. I think because I work in HR, and I always make this mistake, I work in HR, so these are things I do on the daily. A lot of people don't take time out to think about their careers or to work on their careers. They just work. You have to take time, because when they say, oh, I don't play the game, there is a game being played. Yeah. You are in an arena and there are rules to the game. And that's why I'm saying 0 to 5 years, when you just go in and you're just working hard, it works because you're a junior in your career. You just want to be excellent. That's fine. When I was an AVP for a long time, and that's because I didn't understand how to navigate from working really hard to then getting the personal brand and getting the sponsors and all the interpersonal skills. So for a long time, and that's when Winnie and I met, we're both like, what's going on? What's going on? There seems to be this. And then it was like, I felt like I had a light bulb moment where I was like, oh. And you know what? We had a manager who will not be named. We had a manager, and I love her for one thing. She said to me, we used to have one-to-ones every week. And she said, every quarter, we're going to have a development conversation. And in those conversations, we would go for a walk. She wouldn't let me have a notepad or a pen or anything. And I had to talk. And every time I tried to divert to, oh, I need you to help me. No. This is about you. Be selfish. What do you want? She wanted me to say out loud, I want to be promoted. Interesting. What are you going to do different? And then I started voicing things out. And then a plan came out of that. And that's what I mean by people working on their careers. I feel like those development conversations helped me step out of the 9 to 5, work, and to actually think, where do I want to go? Okay, how am I going to get there? What do I need to display? Who do I need to know? That's a different focus. Absolutely. It's a different conversation. I was doing that because I worked in HR. My manager was in HR. And so I thought that was normal. So when I started coaching people and people weren't doing this, I was like, so what's your development plan? What do you mean? How can you not have a development plan? How can you? So people need to understand that there's the working every day, but then there's also the strategy and the game that must be played on your career. You are working a job, but you want to progress in your career. Two different things. Your job and your career are two different things.
Yeah. And I also think, to the original question, there are more opportunities earlier in your career. You've got to think about it as a pyramid. There are fewer leadership positions
as you go up.
As you go up. And I'm not saying that means you should hop, because to the point that B made, your early career is when you are building your skills, when you're building your value. Yeah. So that's when
building your confidence as well.
Your confidence. You're building all those things. I actually was so much more confident when I started my career, because I just was naive.
But you were killing it though.
But because I just fell forward into everything. Yeah. I remember going very early in my career into a training session that my boss had organized, and we got there and there was nothing in the room. It was empty. And she started to panic. And I said, don't panic. It's okay. I'll just call the facilities guys. They'll bring chairs. I'll call the catering guys. Because at that time, when you're junior, you are talking to facilities every day and talking to catering, so I know who to call. And I remember her being so blown away. I can't believe you got that together so easily. But at that time, it was just like, but that's what you do. And I think if that's the time when you have the opportunity to just
Graft.
fall into things. If someone says there's a project going, I remember also early in my career, I started my career on a 3-month contract in my previous organization. I stayed for 11 years. But in my 3-month contract, the work they gave me, I could do really quickly. It was like a week's work. I could do it in 2 days. So I put my hand up and said, what else do you have that needs doing? Because I'm getting bored.
Yeah.
And they loved that. They were like, okay, well, what about this? And what about this? And I got to work on some of the most exciting career-defining projects. So I think if you can ask...
Yes.
And a lot of people just want to do the 9 to 5 and go home.
Yes.
But what makes you stand out is the extra mile, is the discretionary effort, is when people act like the organization's problem is also their problem. That's when they take accountability. That's when they're like, oh, I noticed this. Why don't we do this? It's not your job, but you noticed this.
100%.
You stand out for that. I was talking to my sister. Funny, my sister's 13 years older than me, but career stuff, it's always the other way around. And she was talking about her manager. And I asked her, I said, have you asked your manager what keeps them up at night? And she was like, well, why? She's my manager. I was like, they're people too. They have things that they're worrying about. And the way you stand out from a whole team is when they know that they have someone who's fighting their corner for them.
100%.
So I was like, go and ask them what keeps them up. How can you contribute to game changer? She came back to me a month later. Oh my God. Now she's telling me all these things. I've helped her do this. I've helped her do that. Because sometimes you have a skill set in a background that maybe the manager doesn't have. Because as you work longer and longer, there are different things you've done in the past that maybe they don't have. So if they tell you, oh, I'm really worried about this accounting thing. I did accounting. I don't love it, but I can help you. Let's sit down and do this together. You stand out. So tell me, if they're looking for opportunities, why wouldn't they think about you? But a lot of people are looking straight. You can manage up, you can manage down, you can manage your peers.
And also broader.
Yes.
Because I meet so many people when I'm mentoring and coaching who have bosses who don't respond well to these things. And I always say, people can't take you where they've never been.
True.
So you might have a manager who looks at you, say, I've had managers who said to me, I remember once I applied for a job 3 levels higher than me, and the person who was hiring went to my boss and said, isn't Winnie an analyst? Like, why is she applying for VP jobs?
Yeah.
My boss sat me down and was like, did you read the role profile wrong?
Of
And
course
I was like, well, no, the job sounded exciting. And I was very naive and a little bit crazy. But sometimes that's important. But the reason I mentioned that point is because, that manager she'd often tell me, like, chill out a bit, mate. She was very chill out a bit. And you know what? That's okay, because that's her experience. That was her time frame. But I've now learned, actually, I can meet people from other teams. If there's a team I want to work in, I go and find the boss of that team, I introduce myself. Are there any projects you're doing that I can get involved in? I've mentored people who said, I've told my boss I want to get a promotion, but that promotion would make me their peer. So they're not helping you. So you actually need to go to a person above your boss. That's who you need to influence.
Yes.
So you shouldn't just be pigeonholed. And there'll be people who don't like your light. They'll be intimidated by it. I've worked with many people who felt uncomfortable with the fact that I'm loud. I've been told I'm too vocal. People who've told me I'm too, Winnie, that's too many achievements you're talking about. Maybe reduce it to 3.
What did you do then?
I'll be like, okay,
another achievement.
cool. But someone else will hear
one.
about that achievement, and the key decision maker will hear about those achievements. If you don't want to hear about it, well, that's fine. But you think of that person in their bubble. That you're not just influencing just your team. You're influencing
the whole
tons of decision makers to recognize that, like, where you are now does not define where you are forever. You can have a difficult boss who doesn't support your development. B and I talk a lot about something called your board of directors. And on the Accelerate YouTube channel, you'll see that there are different videos. So there's one on strategically planning your career, where we talk about your board of directors. So I say, if you think of your career as a company, every company has a board. So you need to recruit people to sit on your board that are influential in the direction of your career, just like a company has a board.
Yes.
So your line manager is just one person on that board. The next person is maybe your friends and family. I put them there because if I'm taking a big career decision, I speak to my husband. We need to work on childcare for our kids. We've got 2 beautiful young daughters, but it means I can't gallivant everywhere. I need to make smart decisions. Then you'll have your mentor. So your mentor is the person who isn't your boss, may not work in your team, but maybe they're doing something you'd want to do into career job or career moves time. So they are advising you on what you're doing. Then you have a sponsor who's different. They are the decision maker who can speak about you in rooms that you can't be in. So they're in your performance calibration discussions. They are the decision maker in the job that you want to go into one day. So but there might not be a job today. So the job I have now, that's how I got my job. It's because I approached a company I wanted to work for. They didn't have a job. I kept the relationship. That person moved to a different company and they called me to come there. So you have a sponsor who's like, actually, we have a job. We need a person. They are the decision maker. They help get you in that position.
Yeah.
Then you might have people who are industry leaders. You know, the ones you follow on Instagram, they've done your job that you want to do in 10 years and you see them. You're following the way they come across on social media. You're listening to their podcast, the way they communicate, the way they talk about their expertise. You're learning from that. They are on your board, whether they know it or not. So your board has to be made up of lots of different people. So if I have a boss who is difficult, I'm actually okay with that. Why? Because I know they are not my forever. And chances are they are not the person who's making the strategic decision about where I end up.
Yes.
And also, if they are a blocker, like I said, there are multiple doors. So if I can't excel where I am, I'm still building my value. I'm still working on the projects that build my expertise. I'm thinking about KPIs I can talk about in my next interview.
Yes.
But I'm grooming the next employer in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm preparing my CV and my experience so that when that door opens, I have the things to say. So you can't just think about your boss as the only decision maker.
Yeah.
But everything Winnie is saying just validates my point about people need to take time out to work on their careers. Because all of these things take intention. I'm going to have a board. I'm going to find a mentor. I'm going to find it. You in your 9 to 5 as you're working, that doesn't just happen organically if you don't go looking for it. So people need to take time out to think about these things, to focus on these things, to plan these things. If they want to accelerate their careers, 100%. Then it's important to do those things, but they don't just happen.
Yeah.
Can I also talk about one important thing?
Yes.
People need to stop acting like them showing up well is a gift to their employer. I can't tell you in this climate how many people I see who will not show up on camera to important meetings. People who come to log on to work in their dressing gown. And the thing is, that might be okay if you have an admin day. You can work from bed if you have a day where you don't have to see anybody.
Yes.
But I noticed this very interesting thing. One time I was in a meeting and I observed that anytime a person's camera was off, when the person was talking to them, they didn't talk to this black square. They were looking up, they were looking around, and it made me realize that people think they're talking to an abstract voice.
Yeah.
They don't think they're talking to a person because they can't see you.
Yes.
So stop counting yourself out of important decisions and important meetings because you think, oh, I can't be bothered for those people. You're showing up visibly. Your brand is yours.
Yes.
If you don't like your company, it doesn't mean that you just show up anyhow. Because you sometimes don't know who is watching you.
And who's moving where.
And someone is watching.
Where.
Yeah.
There's one job I had with the banking job I took, because I was in HR, I wasn't preparing for any banking jobs.
Yes.
But there was a person who was my peer that I worked on a side project with. We ran an employee resource group together. I was the chair of the employee resource group and they were a member of the team. Someone that I would just kiki, laugh with. We got on well. She was lovely. While I was on maternity leave, she got promoted twice and had become a director. She picked up the phone and said, there's a role on my team. Would you want to move?
How long were you on maternity for?
Wow.
Not long. I took 6 months. I had 2 kids back to back. I came back pregnant. But funny enough, I was on mat leave for 6 months. But to your point around, you don't know where people are moving. She got progressed very quickly.
Okay.
You could have seen. I could have just seen her as. She's just,
my
just
mate.
this person on the team.
Yeah.
She was not my mate because by by that point, she was now 2 levels above me. She's the one that gave me my promotion.
Yeah.
So you just never know who is watching you.
Yeah.
So you don't be complacent in
With
some
your,
groups.
even with your mates and your peers.
Be strategic at all times. And it's hard work, but you're working. You are at work.
What do you do outside of work?
So we do quite a lot of things.
Outside of family.
I was just going to say, I've got 3 young children. Well, not so young, actually. So they keep me busy. But I think one of the things that I love that Winnie and I did, we, like we said, worked in the same organization. And a few years ago, we set up Accelerate Black Futures. In the wake of the whole George Floyd happening, we were both very incensed about, what was going on, and we were trying to think about what we could do, and we were talking about our careers a lot. And so Accelerate came off the back of us wanting to bottle some of our trial and errors in our career to try and help, Black professionals. And it was really more for early careers. But as we started, so we were doing like educational series, we were doing inspirational series, talking to, similar to what you guys are doing, talking to Black leaders to help, share some of their struggles and challenges. And what we realized was, as we started, even people who were like mid-level careers who've been working for like 10 years plus were like, we need this stuff. Like, these are the kind of things we want to hear. So we did that. And I think we used to call that our 6th child, because I had 3, Winnie had 2. In the thick of COVID, I was homeschooling 2 children and I had a 12-month-old digging in sockets, and then we would be on course till 11 o'clock at night. And I think you make the time for, your passion projects, things that you would do, like where you wouldn't think about being paid because you're so passionate. So we do Accelerate Black Futures. And then in the last year or so, I'm working with a few other senior women in HR, Black women in HR. We've set up a network. So we have quite senior individuals, women in HR. We meet up and we have events where we focus on us, because we know we're a rare and valuable commodity, and we're just trying to create a support system for ourselves. So we had our launch event this year. We had June Sapong come and just kind of cheer us on, which was absolutely amazing. She has such an amazing career, and so she shared some gems on the day. And we're making sure that we're just creating that peer network. Winnie and I have talked about that, where now I can pick up the phone or I can go in a WhatsApp group and I can go, who has done X before? And I will have a bunch of, CHROs, CPOs, HRDs who can share in the industry. And it has been such a game changer in my career. So I think outside of all of the extra things, those are the things I think from a career perspective, it might feel like you might not have time to do things like that, but they're the things that really pay off in the end.
And I just really want to say thank you. This has been a very powerful session, honestly. I've personally learned a lot of things in terms of what I could use on my team, what the expectations within an organization should be, not to leave anything on the table, and how not to leave anything on the table. I think with you guys, it's about the how, more than just telling us, okay, you can do this, but you basically explain how you can do it, which is very important and is what everybody needs. So thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.